So this is our last session of the afternoon. I'm Jenkins. I teach political science at Hunter College. And I'm very pleased that Kanchan and the other organizers asked me to come because I learned a lot in the morning session, and I'm looking forward to learning now as well. Let me introduce our speaker for this session, Azra Talat Sayeed. Has worked with small and landless farmers, particularly women in Pakistan, for the past 21 years, struggling for food sovereignty in her country and Asia. She's executive director of Roots for Equity, formed in 1997, and they also put out these lovely little diaries, which I just got as a kind of clientelistic gift from speakers, so this kind of transactional politics always works. As part of the anti-globalization movement and has fought against the WTO and neoliberal policies, fighting for farmers' rights. She serves on the steering committee of the People's Coalition for Food Sovereignty, a global coalition fighting for small producers. She's the chairperson of the International Women's Alliance and obtained a PhD in social pharmacy in 1995, University of Minnesota. So she's used to the cold American winters, and she's here in 70-degree New York. Kanchan has very kindly given the chairs time to pontificate in advance and frame the issues involved. But I'm sure we are here to hear from someone who's been working in the field. I'll just make a couple of quick observations. Having said that, then I'll talk for like 15 minutes, but just a couple of quick observations. I recall it was Rousseau who said, no, there's just a couple of things that I'll just put forward. In the morning, we had a discussion with great paper and excellent commentary on a very practical subject matter of delivery of welfare policies and pro-poor policies and programs, but we talked about it in a very kind of theoretical terminology that I think some people either were not part of or felt alienated from. And here we're talking, I thought it was fantastic talk and I learned a lot, but I think there is a kind of language of discussion of clientelist politics which sometimes seems to take it away from the subject matter. But here we're discussing something that really is often, at least when I hear about it, seminars or conferences, is often talked about very abstractly, and there's a lot of analytical hair splitting over the difference between different concepts. But fortunately, we have a speaker here who can speak to the real life manifestation of these ideas and really the work that's being done to try to advance an agenda, which, whatever terms you use, are very important. So the sort of three terms that come up frequently in my reading anyway, and some of the research I've been doing, are the right to food. And to a practical-minded person like that, I understand what that is because I understand the National Food Security Act in India and the public distribution system and the way in which that works. And then there's this terminology of food security, which I think, or I thought at one point I understood what it meant, and then it's evolved over time, which is itself an interesting topic from the 1970s when the first conferences were held on this topic, moving forward. We also know the earlier language of national food self-sufficiency, which we don't hear so much anymore, but we'll take that out of the equation. And then thirdly, this terminology of food sovereignty, and there's a lot of debates in human rights journals over whether the right to food or the food sovereignty concept is more advantageous for achieving various objectives. And it seems as though the weight of scholarly opinion, not that that matters, is that food sovereignty is helpful as a kind of mobilizational idea that brings together all kinds of different groups to press for change, whereas the right to food is more practical because there are certain justiciable agreements and provisions that can be advanced as a way of achieving the outcome. So that's the kind of theoretical setting, but as I say, what I'm looking forward to is hearing from Azra about her practical work, which covers all kinds of issues from what I was reading on the internet and past publications, everything from advocacy to mobilizing people to experimentation with alternative forms of farming technologies. And she's written a lot about this in Dawn and other publications. So I'll hand over to Azra to speak on the subject, and I'll get out of the way so people can see.
Okay, so that means I get extra 10 minutes.
Extra 5.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay. It's really challenging to speak to an audience which is very different from the work that I do and the group of people I work with, the work we do, and the daily faces that I see from what I see here. I've been listening since you came to this place, and my understanding was that we were going to talk about inequities. And in the activist debate, inequities is a very, very challenging word. It's a hard-fought word. It's a word of struggle. It's a word of hunger. It's a word of no education. It's a word of no power, no control. And as I was listening, I was constantly debating, and I thought it would be interesting to do a study here in the US to try and understand how people understand inequity in this country. Because from what I know was really absent from what I heard in the morning or afternoon. As you know, I come from Pakistan. Maybe by now you know I come from Pakistan, and in Pakistan, things are very bad on different levels. In terms of security, personal security, family security, community security, in terms of food security, in terms of being a woman. In many contexts, it's really unsafe. My aunt lives just like a block away from where I work, and I never walk with my phone in my hand. I never do that. Because somebody will come and grab the phone. And you think of very small things when you live in a country like Pakistan. So I'll just start with some numbers, just to set the context of food security, as the UN and the FAO and the others call it, which I think is a misnomer and has no meaning. But in any case, South Asia, Asia in general, has the biggest population of people suffering from hunger and malnutrition, and South Asia houses a very large number, of which India is overrepresented. But in terms of percentages, it's actually not very high. Afghanistan, in terms of numbers, is very small, but in terms of its own percentage, it's very high. It's 25% of people in Afghanistan suffer from undernourishment. Similarly, if you look at Pakistan and Sri Lanka, they are two war-torn countries, same as Afghanistan, and if you look, all of us have food insecurity in the 20s, which is very high. I'll go to Pakistan because I know Pakistan more, and I know it more for factual data than countries like India or any others, which I feel very uncomfortable speaking about since I haven't visited India in almost 15 years, I think. If you look at that child, that's what undernourishment means. I mean, to talk about it and to see it in the face is very different. And Pakistan has the third highest percentage of starving children in the world. 58% of the households are food insecure. I was talking to Huma, she's from Pakistan actually, but she was also talking about India and Kashmir. She's from Kashmir, and she was talking about how high the rate of food insecurity is in India, almost about 50%. 18% of women, especially in the breeding age, are underweight, which means that all future generations will also suffer. And nutrition status of less than 5 years of children have shown no improvement in 46 years of the country's birth. Anemia has worsened among both pregnant and non-pregnant women. So the situation, actually, this is just a depiction of South Asia. I don't think it's much different in Bangladesh or Pakistan or Nepal. Maybe in Sri Lanka it is different. Because Sri Lanka actually still has communities which are very close to growing food and are independent of market-based interventions. I want to really go to the structural causes of why is there such high levels of inequity in my country and in the region in which I live. And I think you cannot get away with the word feudalism and colonialism from South India. Those words just jump out at you. Those realities just jump out at you. If you look at the picture down there, that's a picture which you see all the time, whether you are in Bangladesh or in India or Pakistan. They speak to you. That is the power relationship in our parts of the world. And that brings with it a lot of inequity. It brings with it subjugation, oppression, and humiliation. Because I don't want to bow to anybody. I will not bow to anybody. But there are millions, there are billions of people in South Asia who are forced to do that. And it is tied down to the ownership of land. In Pakistan, according to the government of Pakistan's data 2010, 45% of the land is held by big landlords, of which 1 to 2% are very big landlords. They are feudal lords. And 55% of the land is owned by 89% of small landlords. This is Pakistan Agriculture Census 2010. So you can see the inequity right there. And there's a lot of talk of data in this room. And I think we have gone far beyond data now. We know these things for fact, and we don't need any more data. Sometimes I really don't like that word anymore, because we have the data, we don't need any more data. We know what are the basic causes of poverty and oppression. Those are structural issues. Until and unless we take care of those issues, no matter how much data crunching we do, we will not get rid of inequity. I think that was raised during the question and answer sessions also. The second issue is, of course, colonization, which is really not I don't think it has a context anymore in terms of distribution. Because we have been so-called free countries for the past 70 years, and we could have taken care of this issue. The tilt in land distribution is firmly fixed in the colonial period, which our governments, our elite, refuse to do anything about. And so we have to make sure that we put the blame there and not back to what happened before 47. I will get back to that in a while. That is Thar. That's a picture of Thar, an area which has no water. And people will really just dig up, it's unbelievable that people can drink that water, but people do drink that water. And so I will go forward. There's a lot that speaks to me in this slide. That woman is brushing a field after the field has been harvested. All that she's doing is she's trying to collect the grains that have fallen. And she will take that home, wash it, dry it, and eat it herself, and her family will eat it. This in a country which grows abundant amount of wheat. We are not short of wheat in Pakistan. So I've talked about it. I think the only thing which needs to be mentioned is the judicial system. And that's why we are a semi-colonial country. The judicial system does not work. People can be in the local police thana, as we call it, for 4 days, and nobody can dare go get them out. Nobody can dare write a police report, which is very much, then it portrays the power of the landlord, of the local landlord. Today, many of the people were using those words as they were talking about the situation. And so these things, formal labor system, I think is very critical. What happened to the formal labor system? Formal labor system is where the rights of the labor are implemented, acknowledged by the state, and those are now gone. Do we need further studies to find out what labor rights are? I think we know very well what labor rights are. What happened to the labor rights? I'll come to that in a moment. The first wave so I kind of started with feudalism and colonialism, and I go very quickly to the first wave of capitalism, at least in Pakistan and also of course in India, because we were introduced green revolution technologies almost at the same time in the Punjab of India and Punjab of Pakistan. And this is something, it's a book called The Global Rift, and it's quoted in there. I've heard that people may become dependent on us for food. I know that was not supposed to be good news. To me, that was good news, because before people can do anything, they have got to eat. And if you are looking for a way to get people to lean on you and to be dependent on you, it seems to me that food dependence would be terrific. I think the situation of power and the situation of lack of ethics is very evident. This is very widely quoted. It can be found, I believe, in any of your universities. This is directly from a peer-reviewed book. And what happened was that the agriculture that we knew before 1960 was extremely internal, resource dependent, so there was no market economy. But with the introduction of Green Revolution, it became totally market dependent one, which means that corporations could now come in and sell their stuff to us so that we can produce. Second, it meant that there was wide use of pesticides and chemicals in agriculture, which now leads to the current day issues of pollution. Chemical pollution, and then carcinogenic matter in our foods, and destruction of our lands, pollution of our waters, total destruction of biodiversity. And these are also well-known academic facts. I'm trying to make that point again and again. I'm sorry, I may be saying it too many times, but many times activists are made to sound as if we don't talk about facts or not about scientific data, which I don't think is true. You really cannot go far without scientific data. And you have to work with that. So then the second wave of capitalism came with the 1980s, with the weakening of the socialist bloc and the oil crisis. And it came with the first wave of neoliberal policies. I'm surprised that today we talked about inequities and we did not talk about neoliberal policies, which is privatization, deregulation, and trade liberalization. This is what happened to labor rights. It got really whammed by neoliberal policies. It meant that people could not claim labor rights. If they did, they were out. And there were millions of people out in the line. I used to work in a factory. I'm a pharmacist by profession. And I remember that when I used to just drive into that factory, there were like a whole line of people standing outside, and like coming from a middle class, upper class family, I had no idea what it meant to stand in a line. And I used to wonder, why do these guys stand in a line? It's because they don't have a job. And the factories quit giving people permanent jobs in the 1980s. Because there were too many people there. With mechanization in the US, with digitalization, there are now less people employed. We know that with Trump politics very well. Okay, so that's what happened to our whole human rights framework. It got rammed by the neoliberal policies. They are the most destructive in terms of human rights. I cannot say this enough. People were talking about right to education in the very first panel, and there is no right to education anymore. Because if I have 3 kids, I'm a woman, I have no right to say no to my husband. I know very well I don't need to, give birth to 10 kids, but how do I tell my husband that? And so I live with those 10 kids. Those 10 kids have no food, have no health care, have no education. And the government makes sure that those kids remain without food, without education, and without health care. That's just straight politics. And so, be very sure that no inequity can be addressed till we talk about neoliberalism, which is actually the formation of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and this is known as the period of globalization. This is actually the finishing of the Keynesian political system and the coming of the neoliberal political system, both in the context of capitalism. And this is the time for market control. This is the era of corporate control. So all this conversation around technologies and, to me, I mean, technology is not alive. And I totally agree that technology can be good or bad, depending on how you use it. But who owns technology is another issue. And technology in this time is owned totally by the corporate sector. My PhD work was on trips, and that's why I left pharmacy and went to agriculture, because I realized that the biggest crisis that humanity faces is in terms of food. Medicines will come next. First, we have to have food. And they have taken control of the food sector entirely in many ways. I don't know if I'll get the time to speak about it in detail, but it goes from water to electricity to, because solar system, you know, that gentleman's talking about a solar system and sometimes it works. They're putting up huge solar systems in Pakistan, everywhere else, to pump out water for tubewells, to irrigate large sections of land to grow very bad quality food, which has and which will further just destroy the land on which we grow food. So it's really technology. Say solar system is great. It uses a lot of water. We all know that. It uses a lot of land. We know that. Who owns land? We know that. But we say solar systems are very good. Yes, it's a technology. It's good or bad, doesn't matter. But the question is, who owns that technology? How will it get used? If it is going to be used to pump up water, to help the corporate sector grow more bad food, yes, more profit, a lot of money. But what about those I just talked about, the hungry, the malnourished, the stunted? And the list continues. There are two agreements within the WTO, the agreement in agriculture and the TRIPS agreement. They are very, very, very controlled by the corporate sector, especially in the US. The TRIPS agreement is all about controlling technology, especially for us, the seed technology. They have now patent rights to all kinds of seeds, whether they're hybrid seeds or genetically modified seeds, genetically engineered seeds. The market access issue is that the United States and Europe gives very high levels of subsidies to their farmers, who are basically corporate sector. The very poor farmers of my country, of India, of Bangladesh, were not getting subsidies. And the subsidies that they were getting in terms of like lower cost of diesel, lower cost of fertilizers has been removed. So now cost of production is very expensive for farmers in South Asia or across the third world countries, but it is becoming cheaper for the corporate sector. So there's a lot of flooding of commodities, agricultural commodities from the first world to the third world. We call it dumping. So we don't need wheat from the United States. We do not need tomatoes and onions or anything from Europe. We really have the capacity to grow it ourselves. But once it flooded into our markets, it means that the farmers in Pakistan, in India, will not be able to produce, not be able to compete with like 10 rupees. He was talking about price hikes. I thought it was very funny. 10 rupees of onion versus 5 rupees of onion from the United States. People are price conscious. If I'm a poor woman, I will just ask, how much is that onion? I don't care if it's grown in the US or it's grown in Pakistan. I'll go for rupees 5. But what about trillions, billions of farmers in South Asia? You know, agriculture is livelihood. In the US, in Europe, 32 to 3% of people who are in agriculture. In our countries, it's still 60 to 70%. Although nowadays, all these World Bank and the others are really trying to, you know, play around with data. Okay. Just look at that. The top three companies, whether it's Monsanto, DuPont, and Syngenta, they control almost, what is it, 26, 36, 46, 56, about 56% of the seed sector. Approximately, I just did a very quick math.
Is this Pakistan or global?
All over, global. This is global. And that it just shows you the global market share of various corporations across the world. And so this is where we talk about TRIPS agreement. The TRIPS agreement is there to control the technologies, the products that these corporations are producing. So that's why the WTO has absolute relevance to how we view the whole context of globalization and the neoliberal policies. The corporations are given monopoly. They're given monopoly on ownership to life forms. These are living things. I don't want to go into the science of GE right now, genetic engineering. But genetic engineering is really about bringing two different species, like a cow and a flower to breed together in a petri dish and to produce a new life form. Something which will never happen in nature. So they say it's absolutely natural. I've never seen a flower and a dog mating. So maybe it's natural in their terms, it's not natural in mine, at least not in the spaces I live. And evolution has been highly controlled. No matter what anybody says, what the corporations say, the scientists know that evolution has always been controlled. Not by us, but by nature itself. And so when we have taken a hand into nature and said that it is okay because the genetic matter is the same, I think they are crazy. It's only 30 years of experimentation over billions of years of life formation. They have no right to say these things. And then farmers, the DNA material that they work with today is owned by the farmers. They have no right to say they have patent rights to genetic material which was cultivated and nurtured and kept over generations of farmers. In Pakistan and India, we have the oldest civilization in history. We have the Indus Valley civilization, just 7,000 years old. And so we have some of the oldest seeds wiped out by green revolution in a matter of what years. Again, this is something similar to what Humphrey said. This is Michael Froman, your USTR, and he says our trade agenda is committed to strengthening the middle class in the US. At USTR, we're advancing those goals by knocking down barriers to US exports and leveling the playing field for American workers. We open markets around the world. I don't mind, they can do all of that, but not at the cost of our, not at the cost of the middle class of the United States to the very poor people of my country and South Asia and Africa and Latin America. That is where the inequity comes in. If you want to do this within the US, it's entirely your business. We have no right to say a word of what you do inside this country. But if it comes about knocking down barriers in Pakistan, which they're doing, and he was advocating this Punjab chief minister, that guy is known as a thug in Pakistan. The chief minister is really known as a thug. I mean, he has very bad politics. And they are cahoots, you know, with Monsanto, and he says it very openly. I've sat in forums where this gentleman has said, you know, we have done a wonderful deal with Monsanto. He will say it publicly, so I don't mind saying it. If he can say it, why can't I just repeat what he said? Although power is a big issue. Once you cross borders back into Pakistan, anything that you say in this country will get back. So that's okay. I just wanted to actually talk about very specifically the war on terror. After 9/11, suddenly Pakistan, it's a big history, it's a long history. Huh? Pakistan before 9/11 was not getting any funds from the US. Suddenly after 9/11, we saw a 600% increase in funds coming to the Musharraf regime. Musharraf is known for being a big ally of the United States. Like General Zia, who created the Mujahideen, who created the terrorists, the big blue-eyed guys who have just ransacked my country. And today they are the terrorists, and then again we get 600% increase in funds to fight the terrorists who were created in the 70s to fight the Soviets. And it keeps on. It keeps on. This is, a lot of it is from, you know, these research papers that the Washington think tanks do. A lady called Susan Epstein. She does a lot of work on Pakistan, and I've quoted her most of the time. In the end, what it says about the Pakistan military, a military-led counter-terrorism effort defined by haphazard and heavy-handed force against some militant networks, short-sighted peace deals, and so on, which basically means that terrorism has risen by many folds in Pakistan. And as a result, we have now, again, millions of people who are internally displaced. I think you know that in 1979, 4 million Afghanis crossed the borders. 4 million. The biggest refugee community in the lifetime of, in the history of humanity. And now they have been bombing areas in Pakistan called FATA, which is federally administered tribal areas. There are 7 of them. There are 7 agencies And the Pakistan military has been bombing them very, very badly. I've been there, I've talked to people there. I mean, their misery is, I cannot talk about the misery in 2 minutes. You know, I cannot imagine what they have gone through. I cannot imagine what would happen if somebody would bomb this room and I had my daughter and my son and my mother in this room and I'm trying to evacuate them. Just think of that. Can you do that? And they did that. And they were bombing from up there, and the Taliban were telling them not to go because they didn't want the area to be evacuated. So in the daytime, if they moved, the Taliban would shoot them. So they would move at night because the Pakistan army was telling them, you have to move, you have to evacuate because this area is controlled by the Taliban. Anyway, to cut the story short, right after the history of the United States, you bomb and then you bring in aid. And that's what happened. We were bombed, and then of course the USAID promised a lot of food aid, and there's a lot of details. But this is food in kind. For the first time in history, it was purchased locally from Pakistan. I was so amazed. I was so happy. I thought, my God, years of activism has worked. The Americans are now buying wheat locally. And so we dug a bit deeper, and it's very sad. But what we found was that now what they're doing is they're buying wheat locally, or any kind of food they're buying locally, and then they do what they call micronutrient fortification. Because years of fertilizers have really deprived our land of micronutrients. Actually, it's different. I don't want to go into technology. Just let's say that the use of fertilizers has really deprived the soil of the micronutrients. So now we have to give nutrients. So now we have to give micronutrients externally. And so now all the wheat that Pakistan is growing, or the rice, or whatever else you are growing in Bangladesh or India, they are fortified. So it's a huge industry now. They formed a network which is called the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and these are baby corporations, these are baby food corporations, there are other food corporations, and they're going around telling everybody, please let us fortify what you do. What will happen is that the small mills will go out of jobs, because only the centrally controlled large mills can do this. A pre-processed food is coming into our countries to be given to those malnourished we talked about earlier. So the Americans are doing it, the Europeans are doing it, a whole range of countries from the West are doing this. It's called fortification. The bioengineering is doing the fortification at the level of the seed. They biofortify the seed as it grows. So there are two different set of technologies. One is done when the food is already in the shape of processed food. The other is when you do it in the seed itself. Both are very high dollar technologies. Promotion of biofortified crops is a promising way for companies to expand into the staple crop seed market that currently remains largely supplied by informal seed systems, and hence discourages companies from investing in many developing countries.
I think you need to speak into the mic.
Yeah. How much time do you have?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm trying to really wrap it up. It goes on, so the military aid was a different story, and this is economic aid. The one I talked about was food for peace, which is humanitarian aid. So there are 3 types of aid. There's military aid, there's humanitarian aid, and there's economic aid. And so the economic aid is really nowadays, if you look at it, ESF funds, ESF is Economic Support Fund. It is to advance U.S. strategic and political interests through the use of foreign aid. This is written by an American at the Washington, White House. And ESF funds also provide help for the government of Pakistan to pursue economic reforms. I think you know what kind of economic reform they want. They want 3 kinds: trade liberalization, privatization, and deregulation. There's a lot of work that has been done. We know very well. I don't have the time to go into it, but that is basically it. USA under seed sovereignty, USA supports economic policy reform that lead to an improved business environment. USAID has assisted the government of Pakistan in enacting an amendment to the seed law in 2015. This is directly from the USAID website. I'm quoting directly from the USAID website. So the seed laws have been changed. The corporate sector land policies have been changed. The result has been very high use of pesticides and fertilizers. There is very sharp increase in cancer in Pakistan. There is no segregated data to say, and in women, cancer has gone up. There is no segregated data in Pakistan to tell us where these women come from, unlike that gentleman's dengue thing. And so we have cancer, we have many different types of diseases. We already have malnourishment. We have agriculture women workers who work in the fields with these kind of cuts where pesticide has been sprayed directly. And the governments in the US are telling everybody that organophosphates are okay. You guys know about that, I guess, huh? There's a huge debate about it. That glyphosate is a broad spectrum herbicide currently with the highest production volumes of all herbicides. The Americans are saying, even the FDA, the FDA is saying it's safe. The WHO is saying it's not safe. Where do we go? In the reconstruction opportunity zones in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which are being constructed by the US with USAID money, there is a council known as the United States Pakistan Business Council, formed in 2002, right after the bombings. It says about Pakistan's legislation that Pakistani legislation should avoid labor-related criteria that would deter companies from investing in Afghanistan and the border region of Pakistan, meaning no labor laws. Meaning no labor laws which would allow lesser inequities. I mean, it's amazing to me that in areas which are war-torn, it's all in the website. It's directly from their sources. And these are women who have cuts and bruises from cutting beef, from cutting sugar cane. Look at her hands. No labor rights. For us, the answer is for the masses, for the organized masses, our call is for food sovereignty and not food security. Food security means that you can give me food and I'm happy with it. I will not ask you where is it grown, by whom is it grown, what method of production has been used. That is food security. It just means I have enough food to consume. I cannot question the quality or the quantity or who has grown it. And we will not agree to that term. We talk about food sovereignty, which is the right to determine and implement the food policies which we have said are okay for us. It is for us to decide. For the farmers in my country, for women in my country, for the indigenous people in my country to say what kind of food policies do they want and how do they want to implement it. Do they want to breastfeed their kids or do they want baby formula? You think we don't know? You think those women don't know? I think that's I don't think any of us would say that. It means access and control over means of production, which basically means land and seed and water. And then it also means how do we produce? Do we really want to put a lot of chemicals into the soil? Do we want to put genetically engineered seeds into the soil? We don't want any of that. And so food sovereignty is actually a very broad term which is basically, it is built on self-determination, which is a human rights principle. What are the roadblocks? Of course, imperialism, very clearly imperialism, US imperialism, European imperialism, and the power blocks within my country, the people who own the land, who have a very high life, whose children all get educated in the US, who have properties in UK and US, the Surrey, what is it? The Surrey Mahal, what is it called? The Surrey Palace, and now the Panama Leaks. This was about this gentleman he was talking about, no? So, Benazir Bhutto, you talk about Nawaz Sharif, you talk about Imran Khan, aren't they Pakistanis? I mean, do we really think that they will look after us? No, they will not. You know, they will not even sit next to a farmer because he smells or she smells. Because she works with mud. They will not even eat from the same plate. And then we talk about caste differences amongst Hindus and Muslims, that they don't eat on the same plate. Muslims don't eat on the same plate. When Modi came to Pakistan without a visa, did Musharraf, what's his name? The guy. Nawaz Sharif gave him a different plate saying, oh sorry sir, you are a Hindu, I can't eat with you. Did he say that? So it's a question. Whose class, caste, religion are we talking about? To us, it's really class politics. That's what we talk about. I don't care. I go to a restaurant, there were kids who were Hindus and they were hungry, and a group of us had told the guy, the restaurant owner, to feed them. And he came out with a different set of plates. And we were very angry, and I said, how dare you, give a different set of plates for these kids? And he said, they are Hindus, ma'am, don't you know? I said, do you know my religion? Do my clothes tell you what my religion is? How do you know I'm not a Hindu of the same caste? How dare that man brings in Modi and eats with him on the same plate when he cannot eat with his own people who come of a different class? So the question really is of where the power struggle is. I think there was a question which was raised earlier about military. I think it's very critical to talk about the industrial military complex in the West and in Pakistan, in our countries. Unless we do that, unless we question where the money is going, we can never talk about inequity. I think there was a question raised early in the morning. What kind of technology are we talking about? Are we talking about the scale of reform that needs to be brought in? Are we talking about 5,000 people, 2,000 people, 6,000 people? No, we're talking about billions of people. We can't do it with this jittery technology, which if there is a storm, there's no electricity, let alone Wi-Fi. I mean, for hours we have no electricity because it rains. As soon as it rains, we know there will be no electricity. We are quite okay with it. We are used to it. What are we talking about here? So, control over resources, all kinds of resources. Oil, of course. People say, you're old-fashioned, there's no need to talk about oil anymore. Excuse me, just go to Central Asia, you'll find out very quickly. Talk about China and the politics of China and the United States, you will find out very quickly how critical is oil still. The industrial military complex, I've talked about geopolitics. The whole talk about the war in Pakistan is really a geopolitical war. And then, of course, the reform that the imperialists use is a neoliberal reform policy. Without addressing that, we can never have equity. I will finish. The answers are not in technology, it is demanding and acquiring rights. It is distribution of resources, it is distribution of power. It is about the people in the end. Unless we have the people out there, there can be no change. That is the faith I carry, and I don't think I can change that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. We had an hour and a half to this session. It's exactly 45 minutes in, so we have 45 minutes of discussion. I have some questions, but I'm not going to abuse the chair's privilege, so any hands?